As South Africa commemorates Women's Month, paying tribute to women who marched to the Union buildings against past laws in 1956, activists continue to call for an end to gender-based violence. The Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Response Fund is calling for urgent action in the fight against GBV. Let's discuss this with Lindi Dlamini, CEO of the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Response Fund. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
Maybe let's talk about the fund and the work that you do.
The fund was launched on the 4th of July last year by President Cyril Ramaphosa, and this follows the Presidential Summit of 2018. One of the undertakings was the drafting of a blueprint for the fight against the scourge, and this is the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. The NSP was launched on the 30th of April 2020, and it became immediately apparent that there is a need to raise resourcing for this fight, because there are a number of initiatives that need to be driven there, from accountability and leadership to driving social cohesion, tackling toxic masculinity, and ensuring that people have a better understanding of gender mainstreaming processes. And then from a legal perspective, the need for reform in the legal sector to ensure that we have a victim-centric approach that is responsive to the needs of women and children and people who are victimized by the scourge. And then importantly, the need for all initiatives that are driven as part of the NSP to be based on research and to be evidence-led. So those are the key things. And the fund was then formed to say that we need to raise resourcing and make it available to organizations on the ground. We know that there are a lot of organizations working in communities, fighting the scourge, providing response services, providing education and awareness, and providing healing solutions to members of the public within their communities.
Sure. And maybe just put us into the picture in terms of the funds that have been raised and the connection between organizations on the ground and yourselves.
So we've raised 200 million, of which 37 million is in kind. In kind is where we partner with an organization or a corporate to deliver certain agreed services as part of this call. So last year we ran a call for proposals focusing on pillars 2 and 3 of the National Strategic Plan, those services, programs and interventions that have to do with social cohesion, that have to do with training and awareness around alternative expressions of masculinity, and a more inclusive approach to gender, understanding that gender is not binary, and there are several expressions of gender, and we need to be embracing for all. And from a Pillar 3 perspective, ensuring that women have access to the legal system, to the justice system, and that they're protected as they go through that system, and that the system itself is responsive. A number of acts were assented to, 3 amendment acts were assented to by the President in February of this year, all as part of the contribution. I think what is important to note is that this fight has been undertaken as a multi-sectoral fight, which means that we are mobilizing all parts of society to fight this deadly scourge, from government to civil society to private sector, and organizations like us often stand at the epicenter, creating public-private partnerships, supporting initiatives such as the work that we have started to do with certain private laboratories from a DNA perspective and a forensic perspective, in order to bolster the services that are provided as part of the criminal response system.
Very crucial, especially with the backlogs where DNA is concerned. You mentioned alternative expressions of masculinity. What is that?
Alternative expressions of gender. Alternative expressions of masculinity, which say you don't have to act strong. You don't have to believe in stereotypes that say men don't cry. You don't have to believe in using your fists rather than your voice to express yourself. The way that we raise children, very often we raise girls differently to boys. We expect boys to play with certain types of toys. We steer boys educationally to certain disciplines and not girls. And those kind of stereotypes tend to then manifest in toxicity, where boys feel that in order to express their manhood, their masculinity, they have to act strong, they have to respond physically rather than emotionally. They don't have the tools to manage their emotions and be able to express their emotions in a healthy way. And in a society where violence is so prevalent in the homes, prevalent in the streets, prevalent in the workplaces, you find that violence then begets violence, and we need to teach our boys differently.
Yeah, so focusing on the boy child as well, because a lot has been said about we cannot have these gender-based violence conversations amongst ourselves. We need to include men in the table.
Absolutely. I mean, yesterday I was at the launch of a wonderful movie called What About the Boys? And the intention is to take that program into schools all over the country, and it really talks to a number of situations that we all face. What it's like when you need to come out as a boy and you're gay and you face teasing and so forth. What boys treat girls like. The bets that boys make to say, I'm going to smash, using words like that, a certain girl and targeting the girl and making her the subject of ridicule. So I think that that is the beginning of a movement, and it is important that men get involved in these conversations. We can't keep advocating by ourselves, for ourselves, to stop the harm that is disproportionately visited on women, on children, on members of the LGBTQI community.
Sure. With this alternative expressions of masculinity or gender, you mentioned how we orientate the boy child or the girl child. I do wonder what role then us as women have to play, especially in the household. And the question maybe being that, do you find that sometimes women can be the biggest gatekeepers of patriarchy?
It's a truth. It's a truth that we can't escape. In the reality of it, if you go back to why we were commemorating Women's Day, it is because there are women who marched on the Union buildings in 1956. Women are pillars of society. They are pillars of homes. And this is why when we fight for gender equality, it is because we understand the transformational impact that women can have on corporates, on private sector, the change that you see when women are in leadership and proportionately represented at executive level as well as at board level. And so within a home, we similarly play a similar role. And that's why it is important to eradicate gender-based violence, because it's very hard to socialize your child differently if 1 in 3 women are experiencing intimate partner violence in the home. It's very difficult to teach your children that there's an alternative way when their lived experience with you in the home is you as a victim. And so very often we find women using culture to oppress other women, and a lot of women have gone far beyond that. And what we are saying now is the quest for an equal and just society involves all of us. We have transcended. We need men to take up the baton. We need them to flip the switch. We need them to start having conversations at a peer level to say, don't be that man. Don't be that man who in the statistic is going home to abuse his intimate partner, who is going home to abuse his children, who when he's homecoming, when he comes home, the mood changes within the home. And similarly in corporates, we are saying that we're equal partners, and in fact our presence in the workplace enhances productivity, enhances wellness, enhances gender-responsive decision-making at a strategic level.
Sure. You also mentioned another pillar, which is access to the justice system, especially for women. A lot of women will tell you, maybe not a lot, let me not say a lot as if I know all the women, but some women will tell you when you go to the police station, even the gender-based violence desks, you know, it's like they're at the corner, it's very poorly lit, there's hardly somebody there. And they also bemoan the fact that the justice system is quite slow, you know, so you can even end up being despondent. So how are you plugging the gap there?
There are a lot of initiatives underway. In terms of the legislation that has been passed, a number of organizations are working with the different arms of the justice system. One of them is our partner, Mosaic, who were funded and are in Cape Town. They do a lot of wonderful training work. And the work they're doing at the moment now is to sensitize members of the criminal justice system as well as in the SAPS on how to deal with the victim in a way that ensures that the process doesn't result in secondary victimization, in a way that ensures that victims don't remain fearful of approaching the system because the system itself is going to victimize them again. And so there's a lot of effort underway to change those attitudes. One of the amendments in those acts in the Criminal Justice Act actually makes it a disciplinable offense for an SAPS member to not act on a report made by a victim in that space. And then there are also a number of corporates who are working to ensure that those spaces in which a woman has to report are dignified spaces. Corporates such as SPA, for instance, contribute what they call victim-friendly rooms within police stations. There are also the Tutuzela care centers that fall under the National Prosecuting Authority. They also are set up to provide a ring of protection around the woman in a victim-centered and justice-led or prosecutor-led process that actually takes the person from being a victim to being a survivor. And so they are with you all the way from when you report, and they have the SAPS as a link within their space. They ensure that psychological counseling is provided through the Department of Social Development, and they ensure that the prosecutor walks the journey with you up until the time that the prosecutor is prosecuted in the courts. And so that's also a way of not only ensuring protection for the woman, but also ensuring that we increase the rates of perpetrator prosecution and reduce the impunity that we see in our societies.
Sure. For somebody watching and thinking, I really want to get hold of you desperately, what do they need to know, especially about effectively communicating so that they get value and you get value from that relationship?
Two ways. We can be reached via our website, the GBVF Response Fund 1.org. What we also have there are a number of grant partners who are the organizations that we've partnered with on the ground and provided grants to implement certain programs. And we have them stratified according to the region they are in so that it is easy for somebody. We also have information on where to get help within your space. And then obviously for funders out there, I think it's critically important that resourcing this fight is critical. It is, in fact, the undeclared national disaster, this pandemic, and it needs to be elevated in terms of the urgency of action that is required. Because for every day that women are not safe in this country, we can't say that we're experiencing the constitutional objectives of democracy that we are supposed to have with one of the most progressive constitutions in the world.
Ma'am, thank you very much for coming through this afternoon. Ms. Lindi Dlamini is the CEO of GBVF.